Let's take a quick look at what else is available under the Type tool. If I highlight the word quick here, we can see a few things. We can, of course, change the direction, which inside of this text box is a terrible idea. We can change the font, and you can see all the fonts available on my computer. We could change those if we so desired. Every font comes with the options that are available for it. So these are programmed into the font itself. Essentially, somebody has worked out what would be to be regular, so to speak, italic, bold, or bold italic. Now these options are not available for every single font. Let me see if I can find one that, I think this one has all of them. Let me see if I can find one that does not. Generally the ones that come with the program will have all of them available, but if you add in your own fonts, that will frequently not be the case. And off the top of my head, I don't recall which ones. Here it is. I spoke too soon. So this font, Gaboria, only has regular available to it. You can't just go in and change it unless you want to do a faux adjustment in the character panel. So if we toggle on the character and paragraph panels, that will bring back our character panel here. Let's break that off so that it will remain available. You'll notice that we have some options here for the Gaboria. We have, if you mouse over this, the faux bold, the faux italic, the faux all caps, the faux small caps, the faux superscript, the faux subscript, faux underline, and faux strike through. We'll deal with those in a little bit, but just as a word of advice, I don't want to lie to you and hide something. While you can't access the fonts bold or italics because they were not programmed into the font, Photoshop can take a guess and create a faux bold and a faux italic. And it can do a number of fantastic things, like what if they were all capital? What if they were all capital, but the actual capitalized letter, the Q in this case, was the largest one? And that would be the all caps and the small caps, essentially, are what those are called. So it's worth checking out to see if Photoshop has the ability to do the faux if your font does not support the standard size on that. So remember that when you go in. Now, that said, there are still some options that you don't always have access to. We'll talk about those later. So let's go back up. And you can see that we have our types. We have our font size, which we covered in the last video. We also have the font edges, and this is the way that it interprets and creates those edges. Notice how they changed. Notice now, if we were to zoom in, and let's go back so we can see which one we have selected. I've set it to none, and it's lost that anti-alias. If I set it to sharp, it has a small amount of anti-alias. It's only a gradient of about 2 to 3 steps. If I set it to crisp, you can see that it expands out before it creates the anti-alias. If I set it to strong, which is the default, you can see that it uses as little as possible wherever it's going. It's notice we only have 1 point of gradation here, for example, and it's as dark as possible before it drops off. We also have smooth, and that makes it a bit lighter as it interprets what's happening. So generally, I find strong sufficient, and I will leave it at strong. We also have Windows LCD and Windows as well, which I think is the worst of them. It's up there with none. However, this is important to remember if you're going to be using exceptionally small text or doing transformations outside of Photoshop. You may want to consider setting your font edges to none so that it will be what you see from the get-go. So notice this kind of crunchy look to it. You'll always have that crunchy look. You may not want that though. Let me select all and set this back to strong, which is sufficient for what I'm doing. Let's double click the hand tool to get everything to fit on the screen. And let's grab the type tool again. I'm going to click in the paragraph box, and we'll come over here. We can see that we have a left aligned text, a center text, and a right aligned text. Clicking on the center text causes it, in this case, within the text box to center everything as neatly as possible. So the idea is that from the middle, it will go out an equal amount on either direction. The left aligned text will push it to the left margin, and then it will go out until it has to go to the next line. And guess what the right aligned text does? Something very similar. Now you'll notice that this corresponds directly with the paragraph. When I click one here, it will change over there. Now there are more alignments, and we'll get into those in a bit when we start covering the character and the paragraph. But keep in mind, this is just the options in the options bar in the type tool. So that said, we can also control the color of our text. If we click in here, we could make it brown, and to match up our brown fox. Well, that's a little more of a red. There we go. So now we have the brown fox. Now notice this is an issue a lot of the time. You're doing a color adjustment or text size, and the highlight is causing problems because you can't see what you're doing. Hiding it is as simple as pressing Control H. That's still selected, we just can't see it. Let me change the color now to a different brown. And you can see it changing right there. And when I press OK, it's still selected. We just can't see that it's selected, which is I think lovely. We also have the warp text, and we've covered that, and you see that that will affect the entire box at one go. And we have our showing the paragraph and character, and that will also hide them if we click it a second time. We can cancel our changes, or we can apply them. We also have a 3D effect from Create 3D from Text. We're not going to be doing that right now. So those are the options we have in the options bar when we have the type tool selected. Now that's how it behaves on the text box. What if it's just a free floating text? Let's go ahead and set it to the center alignment. And now we can see something slightly different happened. It did in fact do a center alignment based off of its position. If we were to do a Control T on this, we can see that from where it was, it tried to push it to the center. Now this is only affecting the line that I had been on when I adjusted it. So if I come over here and go to the right, center, or left, it will bounce around, but leave the other line alone. Same deal here. And notice it does behave differently than if it were in the text box. So keep that in mind. Now, that said, let's see how that behavior actually is. I'm going to select all of it. And just a heads up, the quick, tall brown fox, for example, notice how this caused the type to move out to the right. Now, if we set this to center and move this so we can see it, guess what will happen if we go tall? Tall. It causes it to move out in both directions. Now, what if we have it on the right? And again, move it where we can see it and type in tall. It causes it to move the other way. So it will move the text. It's just a little harder to see where it will bounce to because there's not a text box around it. That said, I will frequently change this to a center text and reposition it where I need it if I know I'm going to be making edits and the text is within a certain amount of size, within a certain area that it's supposed to be constrained to. That will let me fill it in equally on either point as I go through it. So the other way, of course, is to draw a text box across the area you want it to be constrained to, and then that text box will allow it to be constrained. Now keep in mind, text boxes have their own problems. If we make a small text box and we go the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Uh-oh, where did all of my text go? Well, it's still hidden in there. If I tried to do a transformation, for example, it would just increase and decrease in size. So how do I get to it? I have to go to the type tool, then activate the text box by clicking on it, and that will then allow me to increase the text box, and at some point I will see more. So that's a bit tricky, and it's a bit hard to see. There is in fact a way to know that there's more text. Notice here that this bottom corner is hollow, it's empty. When it's cutting text off, it becomes a plus to let me know that there's additional text, which is really useful, so you can tell what's going on. Now, in many layout programs, it's possible to have the text overflow into another text box. But you'll notice in many versions of Photoshop, that's not the case, and this is one of those versions. Generally, what you would do in an Adobe product is simply when you had overflow text and you get the plus, simply click on it and then click on your other box. But in this case, in this version of Photoshop, that's not the case. Always go ahead and check to see if the newer versions allow for it. Illustrator and InDesign can do overflow text without any problem. So this is one issue that's been around in Photoshop for a very long time. But if you've got a copy that can handle it, and congratulations, that's a very, very powerful tool. All right, so those are the tools that you have available in the type tool option bar, sans the 3D. We're not covering that right now, so don't worry about that. And now let's go ahead and look at let's go ahead and look at some more tools that are available for us when dealing with text in Photoshop. I'll see you in the next video.